Hello and welcome to this special transmission that continues. This is Politics Today. I'm Farooq Patafi, and we are going to talk about Prime Minister's visit to the US, where he is going to speak at the UN as well, UNGA. It is important because Prime Minister is already in the US right now. He has spoken at CFR, which is one of the leading think tanks on foreign policy. He is going to meet the US president shortly. And then, of course, there is a special context to all these movements and meetings as well. We know what India has done. In about 3 hours, it will be 50 days since India has put Kashmiris under house arrest, under its control. So we are going to talk about this aspect. We are going to talk about various other aspects also, because last time Prime Minister of Pakistan met the President of the US, there was significant talk of Afghan peace process as well. So we are going to take into cognizance that bit too. And finally, let us also look at Narendra Modi's yesterday's show. It is important and interesting because Indian media keeps on playing it as if it is some kind of victory of Narendra Modi, who was once called the butcher of Gujarat and who was also once, actually not once, even now, he is considered the suppressor of Kashmiris, the oppressor in Kashmir, and he is also the man who seems to be oppressing minorities in Assam and throughout India. So yesterday, Indian media really celebrated the kind of power show they thought that it actually is. But then you have to see how the entire event was programmed, how it was arranged. It is the election year in the US. Next year we are going to see elections. And slightly before that, Donald Trump gets to speak to an audience of 50,000 people at the expense of Indian diaspora. Narendra Modi is there, but Narendra Modi is, what exactly is he chanting? He's saying, Ab ki baar Trump Sarkar. So he's conversing for Donald Trump. Who is the victor here? Donald Trump, not Narendra Modi, maybe. And then we saw protests there on the roads. There were many, ranging from Indian minorities to various other disaffected groups. We are going to talk about all these matters and more. In order to help us understand these issues, we are joined by a very prominent panel. We are joined by Tariq Zamir Saab, who is a career diplomat, an expert on foreign policy. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Next to him is Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan Saab. Not only is he former president of NDU, one of the leading think tanks, plus University of Pakistan, but he is a defense analyst in his own right. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. We will be joined by others on telephone and Skype later in the program. The moment they join us, I'm going to introduce them. But let me begin by asking Ambassador Saab, sir, your take on the significance of this visit.
You see, this visit is important in any case, because even if all this Kashmir situation was not there, all these visits to New York and United States during the month of September are very important because of the UNGA. Now, since the Kashmiris have been starting August 5th, they have been this is the largest concentration camp in the history of mankind, which is Jammu and Kashmir. How people are, all the Kashmiris, 8 million people, how they have been put in a situation where they have no access to, medicines and food, and they can't contact their loved ones, so they are in a sort of incommunicado. Right. That situation has come to a situation whereby, the Prime Minister will be raising it. We have raised it at the UN Geneva and other places also. Yeah. But now the Prime Minister will be raising it very forcefully, as he said that he's the ambassador for the Kashmiris. Right. He took it upon himself, so he will be raising it at the UNGA. So it's a very important thing in that sense.
Right. Right. General Saab, your take on the importance of this visit, sir?
First of all, I think the Prime Minister's address to the General Assembly is important because a lot is happening, not only in Indian occupied Kashmir, but in as it relates to Iran, Saudi Arabia, Afghanistan. So while the thrust of this visit is going to be about Kashmir,
Right.
I think the peace process in Afghanistan, probably it has already been discussed with Mr. Zalmay Khalilzad. The Prime Minister may also like to convince Donald Trump that he should resume the dialogue with the Taliban and the others.
All right.
So that is both in the interest of Pakistan, the United States, and the entire region. Probably there will also be some discussion on whatever is happening between Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Iran, right.
In addition to the Prime Minister's address to the General Assembly, I think you made a mention of the Prime Minister's interaction with the US think tanks
Right.
and the media. I think that is equally important for communicating the Pakistan's viewpoint. There, I think Pakistan and our Prime Minister has a definite advantage over Prime Minister Modi, because his communication skills are, I would say, much better than Prime Minister
Narendra
Modi.
Modi's.
Yeah. Also,
But when you are rich, money talks for you. Is it not true?
yeah, that's right. But the reverse can sometimes be also true, and I'll give an example of that.
Okay.
Like President Trump made a mention of the dangers and the joint U.S. Indo efforts to control the radical Islamic terrorists.
Right.
In order to win, probably, the Indian diaspora for votes in the next election,
Right.
because as he himself said that there are 4 million Indian Americans there in the United States, he forgot that amongst these 4 million Indians, there are Muslims, there are Sikhs, there are Dalits,
Yeah.
and they wouldn't have taken, very, very well to this.
Right.
And also that, there are at least 5 to 6 million American Muslims from all over the world.
Right.
So he would be actually doing a damage to himself.
And we are going to talk about that, them also, sir. Let me welcome Mariam Sabi, a senior journalist joining us from the United States. Mariam, thank you very much for being part of this program. What is your take on the Prime Minister Pakistan's visit to the US so far?
It's very important that he is here, and now he has the world stage to make his case for Kashmir. I know Pakistan hasn't been successful so far in its diplomacy to garner enough support. I know they missed an important deadline with the United Nations Human Rights Commission to file a resolution or even to have it on the floor. But now he has this great opportunity to make his case to the world community why it's important for these world leaders and the United Nations, especially to look out for the rights of the Kashmiri people. More than supporting Pakistan, it should be about supporting the rights of the Kashmiri people and standing up for human rights. And also, the United Nations is the one that guaranteed the Kashmiris the right to self-determination. So it's up to the world leaders and those leaders that will be in that room to stand up for them.
Right. We have seen this Howdy Modi business yesterday. Do you think that it changes anything regarding this visit or the importance? Yeah.
It definitely was great optics. It was a great show for Modi and Trump to be in that stadium with 50,000 people. At the same time, we need to realize that there were many protesters outside the stadium. And if we look at it, according to the Indian American community, 80% of I think the Indian American vote went to Hillary Clinton in 2016. So Trump had 12% of the Indian vote. So he's right now in election mode, and he's definitely trying to garner the Indian American vote. How much that's going to translate, we're not, too sure.
Right. And Mariam, we are going to keep a close watch and we will keep on consulting you as well. Thank you very much for speaking to us. Now, speaking to us is on Skype shortly is Raza Rumi, senior analyst, who will be joining us. But let me come back to the studio. Let me resume from where I left. General Saab, you were talking about this entire business of, talking about radical Islamic terrorism, or I would like to call it Islamist terrorism, not Islamic terrorism, that might actually backfire, right? But at this moment, there seems to be a disconnect between the imagination, the aspirations of politicians, and the moral fiber they had. I mean, here is Narendra Modi who is usurping the rights of Kashmiris for 50 days, and nobody seems to care. So do you think in this environment there is going to be a backfire at all?
Yes, I'm talking of, the damage to Trump's vote bank from the Muslims in the United States.
Right.
It was in that context that I said. Pressures on Modi are already building from all over the world, let me tell you.
Okay.
And this is happening for the first time.
Right.
Pressures are from the international media. Pressure is from the European Union. The OIC has passed one of the strongest resolutions so far, I think last month. The Prime Minister himself is taking the cause of the Kashmiris. He's called himself as the ambassador of the Kashmiris.
Yeah, he has.
His-
And people don't know how significant that is.
That is, yes.
Because Imran Khan is the man.
Yes.
Nobody believed that he's going to be the captain, and he became finally the captain of cricket team. Then he said, I'm going to win World Cup.
Yes.
He won it.
He won it,
And
yes.
then he said that Shaukat Khanum, and then finally Prime Minister. And he is, after 20 years of struggle, he is the Prime Minister of Pakistan. So when that man says that I'm going to do something about Kashmir, he means
He
business.
means business, and he's doing this having tried every other approach. If you remember when he came to power, then I think he was the one who asked India that if you take one step, we'll take two steps.
Yeah.
And the offers of dialogue by
Repeated
him
offers,
a
yeah.
number of times, but that was taken as an appeasement. And then, for the first time in the history of
Right.
Pakistan,
And absolutely, sir, I'm going to come back to you and Ambassador Saab. Let me welcome my third guest who joins us on Skype. Raza Rumi Saab, thank you very much for joining us. We are talking about the Prime Minister's visit to the US and the UN. Kindly tell us what is your initial impression of the visit so far?
So I think Pakistani Prime Minister has a very busy schedule, and he is definitely lined up to meet very important people, both at the global level as well as the Pakistani diaspora. And we are also waiting for his speech, which will lay out Pakistan's position on issues that all of us have been worried about, particularly the issue of human rights violations in the Indian-held Jammu and Kashmir, as well as the arbitrary manner in which Kashmir has been annexed by India, both arbitrary and illegal, and even by Indian constitution. Many Indian legal experts have already opined that it's not legal either. But, it remains to be seen what would be the net effect of these diplomatic maneuvers, because so far, Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi has secured a kind of, assurance and blanket approval by the top authorities of the US, i.e. the President Trump, who participated in his rally yesterday and did not mention any of the issues that are being talked about. Instead,
True.
he went on to praise the Indian Armed Forces and kind of, supported in the Indian
Raza
narrative on the Kashmir.
we saw that somehow the Indian forces are emboldened by that also. We saw their statements, and we are going to talk about that slightly later. But Donald Trump going to an election rally or election-like rally is one thing. US keeps telling us about the values of value of human rights and of democratic values. But on the other side, what we saw was yesterday, it wasn't merely Donald Trump, who has been criticized for many things in the past, but we saw many other people from US Congress actually there. So how do you connect it with the moral fiber that is being, values that are being preached all over the world, and then somehow US can't see what is happening in Kashmir?
Farooq, as you know, that states often disregard morality and ethics in favor of hardcore political, strategic, and economic interests. The reality is that the US views India as a strategic partner in the long term. In the short term, maybe it is trying to hold off on that due to the Afghanistan issue. But in the long term, it views India as its partner as a counterweight to the Chinese influence in the region as well as the globe. And at the same time, the US corporations and business interests find the Indian market a lucrative and attractive destination. And as regards the men and Congress women you are talking about, well, they have, are obviously there, were there because of the very, long-standing lobbying by the Indian diaspora, which happens to be in very important positions, both in politics, business, science and technology, and who also give a lot of money to their local elected representatives. I mean, the American political system runs on this money machine where local
You're
contributors,
absolutely right.
the more you pay, the more influence you have.
Right. Raza Saab, you're absolutely right. Perhaps I'll have to refine my question and I'll bring it to Ambassador Saab. Sir, I understand, okay, the Americans might not be able to see what Modi is doing because they sort of believe that in the long term, India and America are going to be their allies. But the question is, why can't the Indian diaspora, which is very secular in itself, I mean, don't tell me that the head of Microsoft or the head of Google are people who are very religious. They are not. So why would they not see what Narendra Modi is doing, and why lobby for that kind of a man?
Thank you very much. Let me first of all acknowledge Mr. Raza Rumi for his very candid, analysis. Experience tells you that Indians are Indian first, and for them being Indian or Hindu is like a religion. Okay. So even if they say they are secular, they don't mean secular in the secular terms. Okay. They'll be always this thing. So we should never sort of
take their statements on face value.
Never. Either it's a politician or whether it's whoever. There are very few people who still, speak the truth. Like, for instance, the former Chief Justice, Mr. Kachu, he has today criticized. Then you have some others like Romila Thapar and others who speak their mind and who have a history of speaking their mind, speaking the truth. So those are different people. But generally, the experience tells you that all this Indian diaspora have brought, they are just Indians when it comes to, their national interests or whatever. And in US, they have
You're talking about Indian diaspora. That means they are essentially not Indians only. They're Indian Americans. So their loyalty to America is secondary?
It is absolutely secondary. It is secondary, absolutely. You can, because I have served in Washington, so this is through my experience I'm telling you. Then you have this India caucus, which is a very, very strong caucus at the capital. So they have their influence. And now my experience is, say, 25 years old, but in these 25 years, a lot of water has flown under the bridges. Now what you see is Indians present everywhere, in the White House, in the think tanks, in the Wall Street, in the, name a place. All these big corporations, and you have the Indians heading them or being the number two. Right. So they use that influence to benefit India. So that is absolutely the fact.
And they don't see suffering of their own fellow countrymen?
No. They will see the sufferings of only their own people of their own faith. For them, the Kashmiris are not their countrymen. They are like, they have treated them like aliens since God knows when, at least since 1947. They are Muslims.
Not all?
Well, even if they are not Muslim, but they will always listen to the powerful.
Right.
You know, they will not listen to the weak.
That's quite...
And the moral thing doesn't work with them.
That is quite intriguing. I don't want to actually spend too much time deconstructing the Indian mind, but someday I'm going to ask you, what is the hold,
Yes, absolutely.
Indian hold on these people? You want to chip in, sir? Raza Rumi, do you want to add something?
Yes, just 30 seconds. I think Farooq, you also need to remember that the NRIs or non-resident Indians have been one of the largest contributors to organizations like VHP and BJP and others, because it is a common thing with diasporas from all countries and other regions that they are more conservative when it comes to their domestic politics and home politics. So they have been actually supporting this, and they are, as you remember, when Modi came into power, he came to New York and he held another big show. So they have always been supportive of the right-wing Hindu nationalist idea. Now that is at odds with the society that they live in. So as somebody tweeted, from India, that the word diversity is celebrated by Indians in the US, while the word minority in India is frowned upon. Just wanted to add this.
Let me bring this matter to you before we go back to Prime Minister's visit, which is very important. I asked this question because I don't want to believe that the world is made only of black and white. There is a lot of gray in there as well. And I've known many Indians who are really resentful of Narendra Modi's policies or Bhajapa or RSS's policy. Do you agree with this sense of the house that the entire Indian diaspora would support Narendra Modi no matter what?
No, I think there would be some percentage of the Indians, as would be, a very large number of Americans, including some American lawmakers who have written to Trump, and they've told them that he should pressurize Modi to stop doing whatever he's doing.
Right.
So not all of them, but then let me come back to the real issue here. The real issue is that Modi is actually playing into Trump's hand. His policy of America first.
Right.
So right now, because there was some kind of trade differences between the two, and India was the status of the special most favored nation. It was removed from there. Right now, Modi is going to purchase 5 million tons of LNG from the United States at 20% higher rates than what he could have done from Qatar or from other countries, Iran or otherwhere. So actually, Trump is using him. One is for that.
Right.
The second is that, the US South Asia policy to contain China and to control Pakistan.
This idea of containing China essentially stems from the fact that China is seen as an authoritarian country or a socialist country, and India is thought to be a democracy. But somehow the character of India is changing, character of China is changing. China seems to be opening up, India seems to be actually going in the reverse gear. So the world can't see this, and they are going to believe in this dogma that somehow China being contained by India is a good thing?
Well, this is what I'm saying, that this policy, South Asia policy,
Right.
of trying to contain China through India or control Pakistan through India, I think it has failed. Tell me, how has it worked? How has it worked? It has not worked. The only thing that has worked is that the Indian economy for the last 6 years has gone down. It is the lowest in terms of GDP growth for the last 6 years, only 5 points.
And then on top of that, India's foreign chief economic advisor is writing papers for Harvard, saying that this number, even this number, is actually padded up. And India's entire measurement matrix is wrong.
Is wrong, and it could actually be 3%. And now it is lower than even Pakistan. So that is the issue, that national security has taken precedence over economy.
Right.
And because the Indian economy is going down, including the jobs, and this is the only thing left with Modi, to keep India entangled and the people entangled in,
And
the problem with Pakistan and with
you,
China.
And you have to actually, you are fascinated by their tricks.
Yes.
I mean, shortly before Narendra Modi has to go to the US, he has to take care of the stock market. So they go for corporate tax cut.
That's
And
true.
only impact is because the slowdown is because of the demand side. On the demand side,
Yes.
they actually cut the corporate tax rate.
That's true.
Now, that actually buoys up
Yes,
the stock market, but nothing else. That is amazing. Total optics.
that's right.
Let me come back to the Prime Minister's visit, and that is important, sir. Prime Minister has spoken at CFR. He is going to go to Asia Society as well. Then UNGA is there. He has met with the Prime Minister of UK. He is going to meet with the European leaders, Turkish, Chinese leaders as well. What exactly should be his message? There are certain things which are critical right now, but there are broader themes as well. The immediate concern or contingent factor seems to be India and especially Kashmir, right? But there are broader issues. Pakistan as a market, Pakistan as a democracy, Pakistan as a country that has this magnificent youth bulge, which can be population dividend. So what exactly, how would you actually prioritize his
See,
talking
the
points?
Prime Minister spoke at CFR, Council on Foreign Relations today, which is by far the most important and most prestigious think tank. And he spoke of many issues, but his main emphasis was Kashmir and the situation that obtains there.
His emphasis was Kashmir. Of Richard Haas, it was essentially Afghanistan.
Absolutely, yeah, because CFR, obviously, their concern about Kashmir is not that which we have. So they would like to always get an insight into Prime Minister's thinking about, Afghanistan or region, Iran and Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So that's understandable. Now, Prime Minister in his other interactions, his focus will be Kashmir, but of course he will discuss other things also, the region, Afghanistan, Iran, Saudi situation, which is evolving. And of course, he has taken upon himself this role of peacemaker between Iran and Saudi Arabia. That is fair enough. But if during GA session also and in these bilaterals also, the main focus would be Kashmir is because it's almost 50 days.
Right. It is. I mean, only 3 hours, 2.5 hours,
Yeah.
and then it will be 50 days.
Exactly.
And I really shudder thinking about the daughters of Kashmir that they live in this perpetual
Absolutely.
fear that RSS is going to just come over there
Yeah.
and take them away from their own families. And nobody seems to be seeing that bit. Raza Rumi Saab, Prime Minister is there. You have heard what he had to say at the CFR. And we saw that it was essentially an interactive session. So naturally, it was the other side's call to actually direct the discussion. How do you think should he be addressing the core issues concerning Pakistan? Kashmir first and then other aspects, or there has to be focus on other elements as well?
I think there has to be a balance. Of course, Kashmir at the moment takes precedence over other issues given the state of affairs and the brazen violation of human rights as well as the right to self-determination. And it's Pakistan's long-standing commitment to the Kashmiris that should take precedence. However, at the same time, Pakistan has many other pressing issues. I think we were just talking about India's economic slowdown. I think Pakistan is also has been facing that economic turmoil, and the role of Western countries, especially Western financial institutions like the IMF, the World Bank, much as we don't like their policies and their conditions, is vital for our short to medium term economic recovery. I think that is something that we really have to focus upon. At the same time, on the sidelines, we are faced by the potential sanctions of Financial Action Task Force. We have to get out of that hole as well. So I think it's a test of both our political leadership, our diplomacy, and all the cards that we have to get the country out of this serious crisis. Because the Kashmir crisis has only come in August. The other problems were brewing for many months, and it is therefore paramount that we look at
Talk about those
all
elements as well.
sides of the picture, particularly getting foreign direct investment, because
Daza
economic
sir,
recovery
let me
requires
ask you
that.
another question before I go back to the rest of the panel. Sir, since you're talking about pitching Pakistan's economic aspects, tell me, how should Pakistan be marketing its brand? Should it be an extension of CPEC and or some kind of gateway to the regional trade? Or you would look at Pakistani people and especially the youth bulge and say that Pakistanis are very competent, you should be investing there, they can be a great potential market. How are you going to actually present Pakistani brand to the world if you have the chance?
Yeah, so I think the what you mentioned about the regional position and the regional advantage that Pakistan has, very few countries in the world have that. I mean, we are at the crossroads of Central, Western, and Southern Asia, and we have two ports. We have a reasonably good infrastructure compared to many other developing countries. I mean, even look at the region, and Pakistan infrastructure-wise is way ahead than, let's say, Bangladesh or even India, for that matter, despite the big Indian market. Our connectivity is going to improve further with the ongoing CPEC projects. Some of them have already been completed and many are in the pipeline. Of course, they're slowed down due to the financial crunch. So I think that's the biggest selling point that we have. And once Afghanistan stabilizes,
Demography
I
later?
mean, I personally, pardon?
Geography first and demography later?
So yes, and demography then comes in. See, the problem is that we are a very big market again compared to many other countries of the world. We are fifth or the sixth largest population in the world. So we are an attractive market, but that market can only be attractive if there is enough demand and if there's enough income and there's economic prosperity in the country. At the moment, we are going through a contraction phase, and it is being reported in the world media as well. So we really have to focus on getting the economic indicators right and get to the point of economic recovery, and maybe yes, then
Naturally,
demography plays in.
Raza Sahab, naturally one has to talk about that also, and one has to look at the broader economic picture too. But there is no harm in actually including the world in this internal dialogue on economics, General Sahab. How would you actually pitch Pakistan? Because for 73 years, what I've heard is Pakistan has great geography. Demography is also important. I mean, how are we going to pitch that? Is it not important?
Well, yes, it is important. I think right now Pakistan has taken a number of measures. For the first time in the history, I think the defense budget has been frozen. Actually, it has gone down by 15%. And the armed forces have willingly agreed to this. This has never happened before. All right, so this actually speaks of how seriously is this issue being taken. Then I think the progression of the CPEC itself, I would say it is extremely important.
Right.
And
But, sir, when I'm talking about the comparison between geography and demography, the aspect is that there is a youth and you can educate. I mean, now educational institutions all over the world are also businesses. Can we ask them to come over here, provide us the kind of academe that we might need to actually compete with the world?
yes,
There
I
are
think
many opportunities.
Yeah, this is a very good suggestion, and we are talking of the brain drain, which may have gone out from here. But let me say, I think we do not have any dearth of very good economists in the country.
Yeah.
Actually, the issue is that of resources and also the management of those resources. I
Right.
think over many decades in Pakistan. So I think the government is now looking, and I think the economy is moving towards stability, so which is a good thing. Very quickly, the issue of Kashmir and Afghanistan, they are actually linked. I mean, this is what we need to tell the US government, that you cannot separate them, because we are busy in the Afghan peace process, and all of a sudden Pulwama happens, and then they start attacking you.
Balakot, yeah.
So all our efforts, our resources, our energies, our intelligence, direction, it has to shift from the western to the eastern border, and so on and so forth. So they are very closely linked.
And the optics of Kashmir, where people see humanity suffering, that actually radicalize people in Pakistan as well. Because, I mean, there are comparison, people keep on asking you,
this is just-
if you're talking about Kashmiris, why are you not talking about A, B, C or C?
Exactly.
The humble submission is Kashmir is integral identity or part of Pakistan's, concept of nation state.
Absolutely. Look, when the Prime Minister in Landikotal, he said that any Pakistani who wishes to cross the line of control, they would be the enemies of Kashmiris in Pakistan. And it was immediately acknowledged by the US State Department. But once the Indian, foreign minister says that we are going to occupy Azad Kashmir, or once their home minister, he threatens Pakistan with the use of nuclear weapons first, they're absolutely quiet about it. India is today actually the biggest radical theocracy in the world. Why then are they not worried about that? The Indian nuclear weapons are in their hands, and they are a danger, to Pakistan, to the rest of the world, to China, and everyone else. That is the issue, that they should be concerned about. Again, I would say, look at the duplicity of the US State Department, that once Balakot was being attacked, they condoned it, and they said they are doing counter-terrorism operations. So, these are the things.
Did they make that statement?
Yes, absolutely. John Bolton said that they said, and
where is
Pompeo also
Bolton
said
now?
the same.
So where is Bolton now? Although he didn't speak on
he's
record.
gone home.
No, but he didn't speak on record, right? He was a neocon, so naturally they had this entire idea, this dogma,
exactly.
that somehow China has to be contained via India, is their creation, right?
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
he's
Can
gone-
I add another point? The important point is that what will happen, let's say, if our policy of political, diplomatic and humanitarian support to the Kashmiris fail?
Right.
What is going to happen? What happens, because the Prime Minister's speech at the General Assembly has raised so much of expectation. He's been telling the people to wait till such time this is over. And if nothing happens, if India doesn't take any action, then public opinion, public pressure is going to mount on the government of Pakistan to look at other options.
Ambassador Sahab, do you see anything positive coming out of this Pakistan-India confrontation? Maybe another dialogue, maybe some kind of concession from Indian side, some kind of
I don't think so.
flexibility?
Let's not be be over optimistic about all this situation. They have whatever steps they have taken on 5th of August. It's very well planned, very well conceived. So it's not just knee-jerk thing, something.
But
So
will they be able to continue with the curfew?
that's a different thing, because
And the
they
blanket
will
ban on
now this
communication.
whole visit to the US, because they have been able to fool the US president and others because of their diaspora, blah blah, whatever.
US president is too smart to be fooled by anybody.
So,
though.
the point is, because he's also looking at next elections. So just to appease them, because they have a big presence there, he didn't say anything about Kashmiris. So maybe this kind of, backdoor, behind the scene understanding or something. And then what happens at the UNGA? That's very important, whether in their other bilateral meetings between India and other countries, whether other countries raise this issue with the Indians and tell them to improve the human rights situation in Jammu and Kashmir. So a lot depends on that. In the near future, at least, I don't see any,
Correction coming in this
between India and Pakistan. I really don't see any big breakthrough.
I'm glad that we keep on ending up talking about UNGA, because that is the main reason why the Prime Minister is there. But it also shows you, or it signifies an important milestone back in 1940s, the initiation of this liberal world order that was quite dominant for quite some time. People now say that now that liberal world order is on the retreat, and that's why no matter what you say at the UN, nothing is going to happen. Balakot attack happened, the entire world is silent. Why? Because they think that the entire world is now broken.
You see, it's a very interesting comment that you made. you know, in the 40s, these people who were at the forefront of creating this liberal world order, and this was being discussed, for instance, at CFR. You know, it was one of the CFR and the State Department. Now CFR, you might have seen the people at the helm of affair in CFR, and then Henry Kissinger talking about a post-American world. So, you know, is there something that even, you know, during the Second World War and the war was still going on.
Post-American world is essentially Fareed Zakaria's idea.
No, not just only him.
He wrote a book back in 90s.
Yeah.
And he was at that time CFR's editor of Foreign Affairs.
Even Richard Haas talks about it. Henry Kissinger speaks about it. And then this book, Living in the Shadow of the American Century, it's an eye-opener.
Yeah, but Fareed Zakaria is essentially from India. So, I mean, when he's saying that the US is going to decline and others are going to...
you know, the Zakaria, because, you know, he's not as American as, for instance, the others that I am referring to. So, you know,
He's
there
fairly
is
balanced
people are already...
I mean, he was editing Foreign Affairs when Clash of Civilizations actually was published in that publication. And you know, Huntington was his professor. So you can see all the linkages that emerge.
You know, now people are already, because all these Bretton Woods institutions have failed, you know, now all discussions are going on around the world.
Don't say that, we are still actually connected.
We are connected to that, but you know, there is a discussion going around, and there is a very serious discussion in Geneva and other places, where, and this World Economic Forum, where they are already discussing the future financial architecture of the world, and that is going to determine where, you know, each nation stands.
Right. That is important, sir. Let me go back to Raza Rumi Saab, because we have to soon conclude the program as well. Raza Rumi Saab, whenever Pakistan is talking to any other country, it seems that we are talking especially with reference to our region, India's situation in Kashmir and then Afghanistan. Is it about time that we actually sort of dehyphenate our relationship with other countries and divorce them from our neighbors and try to have a dialogue directly with those countries? For example, the US and Pakistan have worked together for quite a lot of time, and they have actually helped each other a lot. Is it about time that we actually emphasized the commonalities between the two countries?
I think absolutely I agree with you. I mean, whereas we cannot, move back from our position and our, just and long-standing position on Kashmir. But as I mentioned earlier as well, we have to think about our national interests too. So as it happens, the United States, I mean, we have had a more security-oriented relationship, and that is always in the news, but we often forget that the US is still Pakistan's one of the largest destinations for Pakistani exports. And secondly, US is also maybe, I think, the second or the third largest source of remittances to Pakistani economy, which have kept us afloat. So I think that avenue is already open, and we need to focus on how do we expand that trading relationship further. How do we get more direct investment into the country and find other ways that are going to strengthen us? See, all of this discussion, I've been reading and watching Pakistani TV channels and lots of commentaries, but one critical area that is missing from them is that why is it that Modi is being feted by Trump and all the US congressmen? Because let's face it, I mean, in India in the last 10, 15 years has not only grown economically, but it has also marketed itself very well as this a hot destination for investment and trade. And that obviously is paying off. The world, when it comes to all the human rights abuses in Kashmir and all other complaints, the lynchings of Muslims, etc., they all turn a blind eye, because at the end of the day, hardcore economic interests outweigh all other considerations. And I think that's a lesson for us too, that we have to strengthen our economy, our education system, and our export sector, and only then we will be in a position to influence the world.
Right. Raza Rumi Sahab, I'm afraid we have to leave it at that. But absolutely everybody agrees that we have to work on our economy. Thank you very much for joining us. Let me also thank the other two participants, very valued participants of this program, Lieutenant General retired Raza Mohammad Khan Sahab. Thank you very much, sir, for your time. Ambassador retired Tariq Zamir Sahab, thank you very much for your time as well. Viewers, you have listened to our participants. Of course, this visit continues, and we know shortly Prime Minister of Pakistan will be meeting Donald Trump, President of the US. Earlier, when Raza Rumi was talking about India's diaspora and its marketing of itself, two things actually occurred to me, and they are very important. On one side, whenever India actually projects itself, it sort of undermines others, other neighbors as well. It has been talking negatively about Pakistan incessantly. That perhaps has to change. At this moment, a lot of Indian diaspora members seem to be disconnected from Narendra Modi's value system. Perhaps Pakistan has to work on that too, because now things might be changing. Delhi seems to be the rape capital of the world now. These things have to be seen and people have to take stock. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching us. Take care.